You got to be able to love yourself to life. We're talking about the elephant in the room when it comes to domestic violence. And so let's talk about the elephant in the room. The number one, and I don't understand how this can be, but the number one thing you always hear people say is that, well, if they loved themselves, then they would have just left. They wouldn't have stayed in the domestic violent relationship. And I feel like it's because you have a ton of people that they haven't dealt with it in their area, in their immediate circle. Mm-hmm. So to them, it's always, okay, well, if something hurts you, you get up and you walk away. But it's not that simple. So when we talk about the elephant in the room, when it comes to that, let's talk about that mindset when it comes to the woman who stays as opposed to the woman who leaves.
It's easier said than done for people to say, why don't you just leave? Why don't you just walk away? And a lot of times I call that the stained glass window syndrome, because sometimes you're on the outside looking in, and in order for women to, or men, because let's just be real, there are women who are the victims of intimate partner violence, and there are men who are victims of intimate partner violence. It's easy to say, why don't you just leave? But it's not that easy for the person who is experiencing it. It needs to be something within themselves to realize, I deserve better. This is not a normal, healthy relationship. I can literally stand if I leave this relationship or when I leave this relationship. And the thing about it is, sometimes leaving becomes dangerous for the person who is in the relationship. So we have to consider that as well. Is this an easy and safe place, safe time for this person to leave? Because we've all heard about the murder-suicides. And sometimes those murder-suicides occur because a woman has making a decision to leave. I encourage anyone who is in an abusive relationship to take active, safe steps to leave the relationship. But they have to be safe steps. Find a safe place, a safe person you can talk to who will listen to you. And unfortunately, there are some people who encourage others, just stay in that relationship. At least you have one. I've heard that. And that is unfortunate that some people have that mindset of, at least you're in a relationship, why don't you just stay in it? It can't be that bad, or it's not that bad. So a lot of times the elephant in the room is just what it is. It's a topic that needs to be discussed, but it's often avoided because in our culture, it's a stigma to talk about domestic violence. It's a stigma to talk about suicide. And some people just won't support discussions of domestic violence and suicide. And there's also a need to get counseling. Just because you leave a relationship, you may have physically removed yourself from the situation, but you will also need the counseling and the healing process that goes along with being mentally, emotionally, and spiritually healed from the relationship as well.
And, you know, I want to take, you just said like so many different things. I want to go back to the new normal. You know, what's normal, what's not normal. Because what we fail to realize is that even when we look at our teenagers, right now, what are they seeing as the new normal? When they look at celebrities, when they look at what's going on in the movies and the TV. And I mean, the reality is, you know, we want to say, okay, parents, it's your job to train up your child. That's fine and well, but don't think that they're not going to come in contact with it, even if they're not watching television, even if they, listen, unless you are keeping your child in the house at all times, there's no blinders that will cover them enough for that, so that way they can't see what's really going on. And so the new normal is, I'm gonna fight for mine. You know, he cheated on me, so I'm gonna fight the girl. That's a new normal. it's a new normal. But we have to understand, where did that come from? And when we look at, and you said this during, what you were saying, is when we look at our grandparents and our great grandparents, and some of them, the normal for them was, he cheated, we stayed together even though we were unhappy. He did something, but we made it work because it wasn't okay to have a divorce. It looked bad. It was a blemish to have a divorce. And so when we look at the idea of what normal is, it has literally transcended. It has changed so much from what our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents have thought was normal, and then what we think is normal. But now we have to look ahead and look at, what is it that our teenagers think is normal? And so I feel like a lot of times they have kind of been eased into this idea of, if he grips you up, then he loves you. We've been thrown into this mindset of, oh, if he gets mad because he saw you talking to another guy, it's because he loves you.
I think a lot of that comes from reality TV, and teenagers seeing reality TV is with that as well. However, I know some teens who are the total opposite of what we would think the new norm is. And it's because of their parents that I can see these teenagers not going into that new normal and thinking that abuse is okay. I never saw my parents fight. Disagreements, yes, of course, it's normal in any relationship, but I never saw them fight. So as a teenager, my first abusive relationship was when I was 18 years old. And as a teenager, how I thought that was okay, I have no idea. How I thought that being beaten and having a broken nose, being stabbed in the arm, having a hot iron placed to my left leg, and how I thought being taken out into a field, beaten with the whip, how I thought being beaten until I had a miscarriage was normal, I have no idea, because I didn't see that in my home growing up. But unfortunately now, like you said, with television and the influence of celebrities, our teenagers are exposed to a lot more than what we were exposed to. Growing up, the TV went off at 12 o'clock, not because by choice, but they started playing that national anthem and the TV was off. Now teenagers have access to TV, YouTube, phones, electronic devices left and right, to where they have access to so much that unfortunately may derail some of them from what is actually a normal, healthy relationship because of what they're seeing.
Definitely so. And, I feel as though that definitely it affects their ability to be able to stand for themselves. It affects their ability to be able to understand, okay, what is this? What is it that I'm really going through? What is really the idea here? And someone just made a comment from our live audience, is that literally some of them don't see it as domestic violence simply because they're fighting back. So now, because I'm fighting you and you're fighting me, it's not domestic violence anymore, but it still is.
It is. It definitely is still domestic violence. Anytime you're in a relationship and someone puts their hand on you, whether it's just to shake you, whether it's choking, because I've been almost choked to death, whether it is hitting you, punching you, anytime someone puts their hands on you, that is physical abuse. It is not normal. It is not healthy. That person is not loving you to life. And I want you to think about this. That person is literally loving you to death. Because when you tell me I love you to death, that means that you're going to suck the life out of me, emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially. But when you tell me I love you to life, that means that you're going to motivate me, encourage me, pray for me, hold me accountable. That means that you're going to challenge me to be better when you love me to life. I don't want anyone to love me or anybody else to death. And that's why I wrote my second book, Love Yourself to Life. for that simple fact of, I want us to change that wording from I love you to death to I love you to life.
I love that. And here we go with another elephant in the room topic, because I think another big piece of it is you have women and men
True.
who have become comfortable with, when they are intimate with their partner, being okay with being choked. I think that's another big piece of the elephant in the room that we don't discuss, because we feel as though, okay, well, whatever you do behind closed doors is great. You know, that's you, whatever happens. But what was the old saying? Whatever goes on in this house stays in this house. But, you know, somebody just said it in the comments, we don't pay attention to those little things, those things that like that in the relationship, that, oh, you know, it's just something a little kinky that they love to do. And I am going to put this disclaimer, this is an adult topic, but it's the reality of it, because us as adults, we've gone through it. But then again, this is where our teenagers are starting to head and thinking that things like that is okay. Oh, it's just they like to be a little kinky. They want to be a little So we go back and we look at 50 Shades of Grey. We go back and we look at some of these other movies that have come out, and we're like, what have we put in front of our youth? What have we put in front of our women to say that's okay?
So one of the things that I talk about in my book, Broken Believer No More, is the fact that healing does not begin because we have this thought process of what happens in this house stays in this house. And in order for true healing to begin, we have to be able to trust someone to tell them what's going on. And for those who want to be choked during, you know, their intimate times, what happens when that choking goes too far? And there's unfortunately a fatality because the choking went too far, or the person is left with some physical disability and now having to be taken care of by others because the choking went too far. Anything of that form, I never see as okay. Because for me, if anyone ever decides to put their hands around my throat, I automatically have flashbacks, and it pulls in things that are negative connotations, you know? So I don't agree with any of the 50 Shades of Grey, 50 Shades of whatever is displayed in that movie. Just watching the previews, I'm like, yeah, that's not anything I ever want to entertain myself with or anyone else with that, what's being displayed just in the previews. I knew that wasn't a movie I wanted to see or to give my funds to go watch it.
I can definitely see where that, you know, literally we have to make that personal stance. And like I said, there's some people that their mentality is whatever happens in your bedroom happens in your bedroom. But like you said, what happens when it goes outside of the bedroom? What happens when that person loses consciousness? What happens when that person, you know, now gets hurt? So now we have some other things to think about. And you have to start looking at yourself and saying, okay, why is this okay for me? Mm-hmm. What makes this okay? And so that's why that's one of those elephant in the room types of conversations, because again, everybody sees how popular the book is. They see how popular the movies are. There were plenty of books and movies before 50 Shades of Grey that depicted the same things. But I think it's becoming, again, we go back to that new normal. It's becoming back to that, okay, what's the new normal? And the new normal is, oh, it's just, you know, it's just them being freaky. It's just them being kinky. And so definitely having that conversation. And as parents, are you having these honest conversations with your youth?
That is true. But, in considering the things that we watch and the things that we listen to, it's very important that we are attentive to the things that we're allowing into our environment. Whether it's television, whether it's the music we listen to, everything that we bring into our environment or we allow into our environment has an opportunity to affect us either negatively or positively. And since we're talking about teens and we're talking about movies, parents have to be careful as well of the music they're listening to, the things that they're watching on TV, the things that they're saying in their homes, because teens and children, just children period, are easily influenced. So as an adult, as a single woman, I am very cautious of the things that I allow in my environment, because I don't want to go back to that dark place. I don't want to go back to that negative place. I don't want to go back to that place where I had thoughts of suicide or even the attempt of suicide. I don't want to go back to that place. So I am very cautious of my environment and the peace that's in it. Even when I go to other places, I'm very cautious of the things that I say, the things that I allow other people to say to me. Because we have to be careful of that too. People will try to speak things into your life that have nothing to do with you. So you have to be careful about what you allow people to say to you and that you allow to get down into your spirit. Sometimes you just have to cut things off and say, you know what, I don't agree with that. Be aware of the things that we're saying from our mouths. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. I'm very cautious about the things that I say about me, about my family, about my friends, because I know the power of the things that we say out of our mouths.
That speaks to so many different things. Just as a woman, just as an individual, that speaks to so many different things that we need to look at within ourselves and say, okay, what am I going to allow? What am I not going to allow? And what should be allowed into my environment? But you also said something that stood out, and, what are your triggers?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you start to think about what it is that you're going to allow into your circle, into your home, into your mindset, then we have to start thinking about what are the triggers that's going to take me back to a negative mindset? What's the triggers that's going to take me back to a negative time in my life? What are the triggers that are going to make me go back to thinking that was okay?
Right.
And so that's literally a process. So for anyone that's going through that process or trying to understand just what triggers are, first explain what the triggers are, like what triggers just in general are. But then, what would you say to somebody who's in that process of, okay, I'm trying to create this atmosphere. What do I need to do? What would be the first step for me?
Well, identify what your triggers are. For me, it can be simple television shows that are triggers. And I'm going to be very transparent here because I actually talk about it in my second book, Love Yourself to Life. There was a season in my life that I literally had to stop watching Say Yes to the Dress. It's a simple show on television. The women are not, degrading each other. It's just simply about a woman trying to find her ideal, wedding dress. But I literally had to stop watching it for maybe a couple of months because I had desire to be in a relationship. So that's just a simple trigger of that I can tell you. But you have to be aware of triggers of either relationships that you're in where, the person starts talking negative to you that can take you into a dark place. Triggers, and I know of people who have tried to stay in relationships simply because, this is my age and this is a person that wants to be with me now, but it wasn't a healthy relationship. And it was bringing back triggers from her past. And thankfully she did get out of the relationship, but you have to be aware of those things that bring that negative environment. And literally for me, how I transition whenever I feel that happening, I either stop watching whatever simple television show it is, and that's literally been the only one in years, and I switch my environment. I consistently played praise and worship music around the house. It's actually on now, but I turned the volume all the way down so that it wouldn't, interrupt the interview. And I'll just be honest with you. For me to get to my healing process, I literally shut myself off in my prayer room for hours. And I studied the word, I read scripture, I wrote out scripture cards, I prayed, and that was the beginning process of my healing. Writing my book was the second part of my healing, because there were things that came out from my past while I was writing the book that I had completely forgotten about, but I needed to heal from. And it's just to say, anything that's hidden can't be healed. So God brought out things that were from my past, and it's simply because I got quiet before him in order to hear what he had to say. So when I got quiet before him and I just started writing, all of these things came out that I needed to heal from. I received my healing, and that's why I'm the woman that I am today, because I literally took the time, I went through the process of writing and healing and just receiving what he had for me. So, to go from the trigger, you literally have to release yourself from whatever it is. Sometimes it's the places that people go that are triggers. It's, if you know that going to a certain place brings you unhappiness, why do you keep going there? If you know that being with certain people who don't speak life into you brings you unhappiness, why do you keep talking to them on the phone? Why do you keep going to their house for dinner? So identify what it is. I'm not even going to sit here and say that it's easy, releasing yourself from the company of people and things and events that don't bring you joy or happiness, but I can guarantee you it'll be well worth it. Our pastor always says insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. So we keep putting ourselves in situations that are unhealthy, but we want different results. And I refuse to be on the insanity Ferris wheel for anybody. So, and then, another thing I'll bring up is just be transparent. A lot of times when you're hiding, you're not allowing yourself to heal. And be aware of looking at someone else's life, thinking that you see this beautiful stained glass window, because you're looking from the outside in. But then if you go on the inside of that person's life, you may actually be looking from the inside out and realize that what you're seeing is different colors of tape that's been put on this glass, because this woman, this man, this child, or whatever it is, they're so broken that in order for them to stay at the person that they are or just to survive, they literally had to just keep putting tape on this window. And from the outside, you see beauty and you see colors. On the inside, they see entrapment. So we have to be careful of that stained glass window syndrome of looking at someone else's life from the outside, thinking that it's all together when they may be going through some serious issues.
And you just made, I'm blown away about that one right there. So when we think about the triggers, it's identify them, it's remove them or yourself, and then replace it with something else. And not replacing it with the same thing.
Exactly.
With something healthy, that is literally going to take your mind away from that particular trigger. So that's definitely something that you need to look into. And so there are literally people in the comments, and Angela said, yes, I understand. I have journals, 8 of them for my first book. And one day when the time is right, the Lord is going to allow me to publish it. Good things to those who wait his time. Definitely can understand that. And that healing process, it definitely happens through the writing. Now, not everybody publishes a book. Not everybody becomes a speaker or a motivator. Not everybody becomes an advocate. But simply being able to talk about what you've been through is a huge step. That is
Right.
a huge step. People often look at me and they say, oh my goodness, you speak in front of rooms of thousands, you speak online, you do all of these different things, and you tell your story and we're so appreciative, but it wasn't always that I was able to comfortably tell what was going on with me. Why? Because here comes another elephant in the room. We think we can handle it all on our own.
Exactly.
And when we can't, we don't want to tell people I've messed up.
Yeah. Well, I almost didn't publish my first book because when I finished writing it, I was like, oh, I'm healed, I'm good. And it sat on the shelf. And the Lord was like, okay, you've been healed from what you've gone through. Now other people need to receive their healing by you being transparent, open, and publishing this book so that people can see, yes, there is healing. Yes, there is growth. Yes, you can transform from where you are now, because I was a hot mess. I was literally a hot mess. I looked like life was good on the outside, but what people didn't know what was going on behind closed doors, it was literally going through the motions to satisfy other people, make other people happy, and make them think that everything was okay. But I was faking a front, left and right. I was faking. So, and Angela, one day you will get released because somebody needs your story. Somebody needs to receive their healing from your book. So when the time comes, I want you to be prepared. Success is what happens when preparation and opportunity meet. Our pastor says it all the time. So be prepared, because when he says it's time for you to release, you need to be ready to let it go.
Definitely. And so when we look at the hashtag #MeToo, hashtag Time's Up movement, there are some huge, huge elephants in the room that are not being discussed. One of the biggest pieces of the hashtag #MeToo and Time's Up movement has been the fact that, again, people have said, why did they wait so long to say something? And the elephant in the room is, it's out of fear. It's out of being ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
It's out of not wanting people to judge you. It's out of not wanting to harm your loved ones. I know for me, it wasn't until 2015 that I had actually spoken up about me being molested as a child. And even though it happened when I was a child, during a time when I wasn't with my mother, I never wanted to tell her. I never wanted to share it because I didn't want her to feel bad, because she was in college, she was finishing up her degree. And it just, even as a child, I didn't want to say anything. And I just took that into adulthood. But holding on to that opened up the wounds of me holding on to a whole lot of other things later down the line in the process. So when we think about what took them so long to say something, why didn't they say something immediately? There are literally things that are barriers. I want to almost say, not brick walls, but there's like a column, and there's different columns standing in front of you, and they're side by side, and it's fear, it's your family, it's your finances, it's your self-esteem, it's your weight, it's your health. Literally all of these columns are standing in front of you. And what you fail to understand is that if you push them, they'll move out of your way. But because of what they look like, the fact that they look like this strong column that's in front of you, you'll never push it.
Mm-hmm. And there is so much peace on the other side of those columns. And you're exactly right that a lot of people don't say anything because of fear, because of shame, because of what family and friends may say. However, what I've learned from myself and other women, the longer we hold it in, the more pressure we're putting on ourselves. And there's so much peace Now, sure, initially when you first acknowledge what's happened to you, there may be some pressure. But once that pressure is over with, it's just like the movie stars. When one does something, they're the hot topic at that moment. But as soon as somebody does something else, society's really forgotten, okay, what were we talking about last week? Because now we're on to somebody else. Peace is something that I am so grateful for, and I have that peace because I moved past those columns that you were talking about. I let myself be transparent, and it has brought me so much peace in my life. Not saying that I won't and I don't make mistakes now, but you have to be able to take the necessary steps because life has a lot to offer. But when we hold ourselves back, we're not able to receive everything that people want to give us or anything that God wants to give us when we don't allow ourselves to just be open and be who He created us to be. And to receive the love that He wants to give us, as well as genuine love from others. When you allow yourself to be open and vulnerable, you're literally showing somebody else it's okay. It's okay for me to share my story. It's okay for me to let others know what I've been through, because here's the thing that I've learned. I don't know if the person sitting next to me in my family, my friendships, my work environment, or the person sitting on the same row with me at church, or the woman in front of me in the grocery store, I have no idea what they're going through. But having a spirit of discernment allows you to make those steps to go talk to this person and say, you know, are you dealing with X, Y, and Z? I've literally walked up to women, and one I've boldly asked, are you thinking of harming yourself? She fell into my arms and she was literally thinking of killing herself that night. But by me not allowing fear to get in the way and just going up to her and holding this conversation, we now have a connection. And I don't talk about a lot of the things that I do for women in domestic violence and suicide because that's confidential. So a lot of things that I do on the side, nobody will ever know. A lot of the meetings I go to, whether it's something for an hour with women who are victims of domestic violence, would never be posted on my website. I'm very much into holding confidentiality of women and men, because I've had some men share with me as well about the things that they've gone through and the things that they're doing. And with that, on the flip side of that, though, I am in the process of working on a new project of survivor stories for a book that I want to release in October of women who have been in domestic violence relationships and want to share their story. So that is, you can find that information on my website here soon. And I'll also post it again on my Facebook page about how to get involved in that project. So if you're a woman and you want to share your survivor story of domestic violence, feel free to friend me on Facebook, or you can send an email to lovetolife@gmail.com and we can get you involved in that. And no matter the culture, the race, the economic status, the professional status, domestic violence is not stereotypical of any of those. So women of all cultures, races, you know, no matter where you live, no matter what your financial status is, we are all possible victims of, you know, or can find ourselves in a domestic violence relationship. But the more we know and the more transparent we are, the less likely that we'll find ourselves in that relationship, and we'll gain the knowledge of how to release ourselves from it.
Definitely some things that we as a person, as people, just need to openly discuss, openly talk about, because that's one of the reasons why it hasn't been, you know, discussed. It's that hushed conversation. And those of you that have been listening to the podcast for any length of time, we're literally almost at a year. You've heard me say that it's similar to there's this box that has a bow on it and it's sitting on the shelf, and everybody sees the box. Everybody knows that the box is there, but nobody wants to talk about the box. Nobody wants to ask why nobody's opened the box, why it has a bow on it. Nobody wants to ask those questions, but they see it. And I think domestic violence, I think molestation, abuse, rape, I think it all falls underneath. It's that box sitting on the mantle that nobody wants to discuss.
Right.
Yes, everyone knew that something happened to, such and such as a child, but nobody wanted to discuss it. And then later on down the line, it may come out and it comes out in the most random of moments. Mm-hmm. It'll come out in one of those random conversations at the funeral, at somebody's wedding, and then everybody's devastated because they never knew that this was going on. But it was because it was something that you didn't talk about. It was one of those skeletons in the closet. Say that literally you are not the only one that has skeletons in your closet?
Right. And I want to say this. It's not necessarily sometimes that people didn't know that it was going on. They just didn't want to say anything and they didn't want to get involved. So there have been times where I've been in those relationships and the neighbors saw me getting beat. Didn't call 911, didn't get involved in any type of way. In one of the instances, I ran into a neighbor's home thinking that I would be protected at that time. And he ran in behind me and literally dragged me out, beating me while they stood there and watched. So sometimes it's not the fact that people don't know that it's not going on. They don't want to get involved. And how many times have we heard, it's not my business? If she wants to stay in that relationship or if he wants to stay in that relationship, that's on them. Sometimes people just choose not to get involved. Now, here's the thing about it. Always consider your safety when you do see someone getting abused. You can always call 911. Always. There have been instances I was coming out of a store here in Phoenix, and I'm sitting in my car and I'm looking at this SUV across from me, and I knew something didn't seem right. The more I looked, the more I realized that the man was beating the woman in the car with a belt. I called the police. He realized that I was watching them and he drove off. And the police eventually caught up with them because I happened to go down another street and saw that they did get pulled over by the police. But it's instances like that where we just need to get involved that way. Call 911 if you see something. I'm not saying bring the person back to your house because now you're putting yourself in harm's way. Always consider your safety, but you can always dial 911. Give them a description of the vehicle, the people, or whatever it is that you can do. The location.
Very true. It's that thing of if you see something, say something. Every little bit can help to save a life. I know just recently, I want to say last Thursday, there was a young lady who lost her life, I want to say in New York, live on camera. And she wasn't on the camera at the time because she had dropped to the floor and she was pleading for the gentleman to stop. But he made her call somebody else, and they were, I guess, either FaceTiming or on Messenger and video, but it was recorded. And it's like, okay, when you know different things are happening, what stops you from saying something? Luckily, they said something, and the police had come and were already on their way en route, and he was trying to get them to call the police off, and that was what triggered the whole situation. But we forget that every instance is going to be different. So how many times did we see, did somebody see him do something to her? And she was the mother of 3 children. How many times did somebody see him do something to her and not say anything? How many times before that, did somebody say, okay, well, you know what? No, this needs to stop. And I get it. It's very difficult. It's a very difficult conversation to have. It's a very difficult place to be in. But even if I say something, It may not even be, oh, come to my house. It doesn't have to be that. It can just be, hey, is everything okay?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need anything? It can be just the simplest of things. Hey, do you want to go out to lunch? We don't know what happens when somebody can get outside of their current environment.
That's it. And I'm glad you said that, because how many of us, someone has called us on the phone and we just got through crying over something, but yet when they call us, what do we say? Oh, I'm fine. I'm good. One thing that I have learned is we can make people think that we're doing absolutely awesome on the phone. But when you take that person out to lunch, you take that person to coffee or wherever it is, you just meet up in the park. That's when you can see facial expressions, body expressions, and you can be able to tell, is this person really okay? I've had that experience where I had to ask someone face to face, are you okay, or is this relationship abusive? Her body language changed. She was trying to fight off the tears in her eyes, and come to find out that it was an emotionally and mentally abusive relationship. It had not gotten to physical, but it was emotional and mental abuse. And sometimes you can tell in your friends when their character changes, when their conversation changes, or when you're at a party and now they brought the person that they're dating and their countenance changes. They're not the friendly, bubbly person that they had been, and they're always sticking beside him. And every time they walk off, he's watching, or he has to be right there on her. That's control. So those are things that you want to watch out for as well when it comes to trying to identify, is my friend in an abusive relationship? And then say something. Social media has changed the culture so much. And when you were saying that the young lady, it was filmed live, that's just a reminder of how detrimental social media can be on many platforms. Because we've seen this before where people have committed suicide online, where people have been abused online, but also social media can change a person's feeling about themselves, because they're, again, looking through a stained glass window of what people post on social media. Oh, their life is so great. Things are going great for them. Stained glass window. You have no idea what else can be going on. And many times people portray only the good when you don't see what the bad is.
That is so true. And man, it's just like, when you get outside of that environment, it can be all the different. It's that breath of fresh air, because you don't have to worry about who's listening. You don't have to worry about who's going to come in. You don't have to worry, you don't have to worry about those same things that if you're in your home, you're like, okay, I can't talk on the phone because they're in the other room. I can't have you come over because, I don't know what that's going to trigger or what that's going to start, what argument that may start. And so, yeah, it goes into a lot. So that's why I said, yeah, just taking them outside of that environment. Hey, I'm a foodie. I'm quick to say, hey, let's go eat. I am a foodie. I'm quick to say, let's go get some brownie and ice cream. Let's go get some. Listen, I am a part of a family that we would drive about 45 minutes to the marina just to get smoothies and then drive back. So sometimes you just need to get outside of that environment and, see something different, experience something different. It can mean all the difference. A lot of times when we're looking at our youth and the things that they've been able to experience, you see the ones that have traveled, the ones that have experienced other cultures, and they literally go outside of their norm, outside of their neighborhood. They have a whole different perspective on things.
They do.
They have a different mindset.
They do. They do have a different mindset. And if you get youth who are positive, I always encourage youth to be with the positive group of teenagers or people. This will allow you to be able to experience other things that are positive going on in your life. And unfortunately, there's so much peer pressure right now going on that some youth don't know which way to go. And like you said earlier, they think that a domestic violence relationship is the norm because of peer pressure or things that they're seeing on TV with, you know, the man cursing the woman out, the woman cursing the man out, the man having, you know, multiple women, or the woman having multiple men, or, you know, so they're seeing many things that are influencing them. But, you know, parents have a great influence on their children as well. And like I said earlier, I know some amazing teens who are going to do great because of their parents being stick-to-it type of parents and providing them the great guidance that they need. My sons are 26 and 23. I'm thankful every day that they have the minds that they have. They're go-getters. You know, they're two opposite different sons, but I'm thankful for them being who they are.
That definitely speaks a lot. I know with my own children, I try to do that on a regular basis. I get them outside, learn some things, grow some things. Right now, they're literally, everybody in the house is learning a language. So at any given time, you'll hear either Korean or French or Spanish being spoken. And I love it. I love it. Learn the culture, learn what they're doing, learn, you know, the things that they go through. I think one of the most interesting moments was when my sister came up to me, because I have custody of her, and she said to me, did you know that at a certain age, no matter what you're doing, you have to enlist and be in the service when you're in Korea? And I was like, wait, what? And she said, yeah, they have to serve a certain number of years. Mm-hmm. And she said, it doesn't matter what you're doing, because they listen to K-pop. And so some of the artists in the group, they're going to have to go and serve, and then they can come back. And, you know, you look at things like that and them learning things like that. That's not something that goes on here, but it allows them to see, you know, their culture a whole lot differently, and then be able to look at their own culture and say, well, what are some of the things that we do, you know, that may look strange to them, that may, you know, stand out and kind of be like, I wonder why y'all do that, you know? So it definitely takes it to a whole new level. So guys, I thank you guys, those who have been coming in and commenting. I want to say this statement that that Rhonda said in the comments, because I really believe that it's a testament to what we're talking about today on the show. And she said, I was a bystander in a neighbor situation. She said, I knew what was going on, but I didn't know how to intervene. So I watched and waited, and I got to know the couple. And once I established a relationship with them of safety and trust, I addressed them both, the man first. And he asked me, why didn't I say something earlier? He hated who he had become, and was so glad that I did say something. This couple is no longer together, and they shouldn't be. And again, it's every situation is going to be different, but because of her making sure that she created that relationship, she was able to step in. For other people, it may be calling the police. For someone else, it may be just having the woman and saying, hey, let's go out to eat. Let's go out and do something. Let's go to a movie. You know, everybody was talking about Girls Trip that came out not too long ago. Let's go to a movie. Let's go see Girls Trip. Let's go see, you know, anything just to take them out of that environment. So it definitely, it stands out in so many different ways. Also because those who have gone through abuse, those who have gone through molestation and rape and domestic violence, and those who have gone through it, they can see it sometimes before other people can.
Yeah, and Rhonda, I think you did a great job of establishing a relationship and then taking time to speak to both of them. That speaks volumes on you, that you observed, you took time to build a relationship with them, to, you know, kind of see what was going on, and then acknowledge the situation. And you're absolutely right, Altavis, that every situation is going to be different. And I remember a moment where my nephews and I was riding our bike in one of the neighborhoods, and I could hear yelling and screaming from a young couple that was down at the end of the corner. And my nephew said, "Oh, they're just talking loud." I was like, "No, that's not a loud conversation. Something's happening." So on instinct, not thinking about my safety, I go up, and by the time we got up to them, they were in the ditch. And I jump off my bicycle, I run into the ditch again. My safety, I had, as much as I tell people, be aware of your own safety, just instinct popped in, because I remembered the times that I wish somebody had done something for me when they saw me out in public being hit. And, I went into the ditch, and I'm talking to this couple, and, I'm talking to the young lady, telling her, this is not a safe, healthy relationship. And I'm talking to them, and she was 2 years older than him. And, her final decision was, I'm going home. And, he followed along with her. And she was determined that, no, I'll just keep talking to him over the conversation. And I could not get her to make a different decision. But I did talk to her and try to impart some wisdom and knowledge into her about what a healthy relationship looked like, especially for her. I think she was around 20 years old and he was 18.
And then the other piece of it is the flip side is the abuser and what they've gone through to become the abuser. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's so many different angles. Again, that's another elephant in the room, because everyone wants to talk about, the abuser, but are you talking about him as an abuser or her as an abuser when they are in middle school and they're doing those same things?
Right. I think these are topics that do need to start at least in junior high school, if not even before then. So one of my goals is to hopefully get into a couple of junior high schools, and just start that conversation of that topic of the elephant in the room, because it's a topic that needs to be discussed, because it is happening in our teenagers as well. I don't want anyone to be naive and think that only adults deal with domestic violence, and it's not. Teenagers are also unfortunately finding themselves in these relationships as well.
I agree. I definitely agree. We got to think that it's fourth or fifth grade that they start telling them about their bodies and about sex and sex ed in middle schools and high schools. And so if they're already talking about those things in middle schools and high schools, then why aren't we talking about other situations? Right. And I know that one of my clients, her name is Thea, she just recently did a talk in a school where they were talking about domestic violence. And, we see it in the schools, and it started out with, oh, if he hits you, it means he likes you.
That is the farthest thing from the truth. If he hits you, he's not loving you to life. If she hits you, she is not loving you to life. Because I really don't want this to just seem like it's only women who are being abused. There are teenage girls who are also abusing males. So if anybody hits you, whether they're male or female, that is not a healthy relationship. It is abuse.
And Rhonda said it in the comments. She said, and DV on college campuses is rampant. That is where it happened to her daughter.
Mm-hmm. It is. And a lot of times I'll go back to the fact that we don't want to say anything because of shame, because he says or she says, I'll never do it again. I can't tell you how many times I heard, baby, I won't do it again. I promise you I won't hit you again. I promise you this won't happen again. So then the honeymoon phase starts where everything is going good. And then all of a sudden something triggers him, and you find yourself on the other end of a slap, a fist, a choke, a grabbing, and you're trying to figure out what happened. Is this my fault? Did I do something to cause him or her to get so angry at me to want to hit me? if you say you love me, why are you doing these things to me? Maybe if every time he or she comes home, the house is spotless, dinner is cooked, and I'm looking cute or fine or whatever it may be, maybe I won't get hit tonight. Maybe I won't be abused tonight. These are thoughts and questions that go through the mind to try to say, maybe these are some things I can do to make the relationship better. And unfortunately, some women think that if I get pregnant, the abuse will stop. I will tell you, a baby is not going to make your relationship healthier. Because I've been pregnant and it didn't stop the abuse. I've been pregnant and my son was born at 4 months. So getting pregnant is not going to handle or solve your solution. So that's a whole nother elephant in the room right there, with us thinking that if we do something, it'll save the relationship.
And so, guys, those who have just joined in, thank you so much for joining and sharing out the broadcast. We have been talking about the elephant in the room when it comes to abuse and domestic violence. And, you know, it's always that topic that kind of like comes up after the fact. It's that conversation that people want to have after, you know, things have really gone and hit the fan, so to speak. But I feel as though we have to understand that when we're going through this process, again, writing is a great tool. It's a great asset. I've worked with many women who have gone through abuse, domestic violence, rape, molestation, who they literally, that writing process has been everything. And they've gone on to be speakers or authors. And guess what? Not everybody has to be a speaker or an author. But sometimes just writing it out allows you to get it out of your head. And again, be able to look at some things. I know that literally I said over the weekend at an event that, you know, we're scared to show our scars because we're thinking that the scar is ugly. We're thinking that the scar, oh my goodness, people are going to ask questions and yada, yada. But the reality is that if you have a scar, it means that you're healed. But there's somebody else who still has an open wound.
Exactly. And a lot of times we have to make sure we're not trying to cover that open wound with a Band-Aid, when that open wound is so deep that a Band-Aid is not going to help.
It is
and
not.
One of the things that you mentioned was rape. What women need to understand as well is that even if you're in a marriage and your husband forces you to have sex, that now is being considered as abuse. If he is forcing you to do sexual acts that are not comfortable for you, that is also now being considered as abuse. So we have to be cautious and careful in those things as well.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge elephant in the room, because we all know that for the longest time, that was not considered rape. It was not considered abuse because that was your spouse. Mm-hmm. And so imagine how many women went through being married to someone and enduring that on a regular basis and thinking, but that's my spouse, so I can't call the police. I can't say that this is what's happening to me, because that's not what it's called. It's just called being a good wife or being a good husband.
Yeah, I've had those conversations with women wanting to know, is it considered rape if my husband forces me to have sex? So that's a new elephant in the room topic that is emerging or has emerged.
Definitely. And, you know, Rakita said in the comments, she said, I really believe that domestic violence can also be a generational issue and passed on from generations to generations. And it definitely can, because we think back to our great grandparents and how they stayed in relationships literally that they stayed in relationships, but they, it was abusive relationships. They were going through so much stress, and they were sleeping in the same rooms, but in different beds, or sleeping in different beds. And I mean, so many things, again, because of what it looked like. We really had to understand that, okay, that's not the same today.
Right. It can be generational, but Rakisha, I want you and anyone else who thinks that, you're in a generational curse, I want you to be the one who breaks that generational curse. It doesn't have to continue just because those are things that we've seen in our past. Like I said, I didn't see my parents fight. Have disagreements? Of course. But I never saw them fight. So I don't know how I got in my head that was normal for me to be in these abusive relationships. But generational curses can be broken. And it's so empowering and it's so powerful when those generational curses are broken.
That's right. It means all the difference when they are. And so, yes, it can be generational. Yes, it could be something that you see going on year after year, generation after generation. But it's when we decide that it's going to stop, and we decide that we're going to step up and do what's necessary for it to stop, that we really can see some changes being made. So I thank you guys so much for coming and joining this conversation today. And so I always ask people on this journey, what has been a blunder for you? What's something that during the journey you've been like, I wish I would have known that back then?
Where do you want me to start? Sometimes I say if I could go back to my high school years, my senior year, and just start over from there. But, none of us can go back, but we can always, move forward to that. I will say, had I known my value back then, it wouldn't have taken me so long to become the woman that I am now. Every one of us has value. Had I known my value back then, I wouldn't have been dealing with thoughts of suicide. I wouldn't have been dealing with self-destructive behaviors that almost took me out on its own. I would have become the woman I am now much quicker had I known my value back then. And somebody asked me the other day, they said, how did I not know that you wrote 2 books? And I'll tell them, because I don't walk around saying, hi, I'm Dr. Monica Debro. I'm the author of 2 books. I do this, that, and the other. I allow people to get to know me first. And, especially when you're trying to build friendship with people, I don't walk around with that, tiara on my head, this arrogance. People get to know me, and it can be months down the line before they realize, wait, you're who? I know my value, but I don't, walk around puffed up. I'm just the easygoing, fun-loving woman who likes to get along with anybody, likes to make new friendships or what have you. But had I known back then my value, it wouldn't have taken me so long to become the woman I am now. And I don't mean as far as titles. I mean as far as being confident in who I am and knowing whose I am.
Yeah, that definitely speaks volumes. And so I want you to make sure that I want you to let everybody know where they can contact you, how they can get your book, and where to find you on social media.
So you can purchase my books through Amazon.com or on the website, www.loveyourselftolife.co. And so the first one is Broken Believer No More. It can be purchased on my website. The second book which came out this year on my mom's birthday, February 14th, Love Yourself to Life. It can also be purchased on the website, www.loveyourselftolife.co. Facebook, Monica L. Debro. On LinkedIn, Dr. Monica L. Debro, and Twitter at MLDebro14. So, and if you want to share your survivor story, feel free to send an email to lovetolife@gmail.com, and you can share your survivor story there. If you just want to contact me, my email address is mdebro@forevershalom.com. I know that was a lot.
And just so you guys know, all of that information will be in the comments. I'm going to have Monica come back and put it in the comments if you're on Facebook. If you're on some of the other platforms that the podcast goes out to, then we will have it in the description box. Guys, literally, the Speak Easy podcast, as we move into celebrating our 1-year anniversary, I'm excited because we've been able to talk about some very important topics when it comes to the journey of a speaker or an author. Don't think that when you see an author who is standing and showing off a book of her survival story, that it was easy. There's definitely a process that comes along with it. Don't think that the woman that's able to stand before you and tell her story was always able to do it, because I can guarantee that most fight and struggle to get to the point where they can share their story in front of a crowd of 2,000 to 2,000. So understand that it has taken them a process, but that doesn't mean that you can't go through the same process. That doesn't mean that you can't tell your story. And that's what this platform is all about. So if you are an author or a speaker, I would love to have you on to talk about your author and speaker journey. Go to bit.ly/Speak Easy Podcast, all lowercase, and you can choose a date and time that works best for you. Until next time, guys, we appreciate you. Thanks for all the shares and reactions. And don't forget to press it out.